So, Ken Dilanian, what happens from here? We just said the arraignment will be October 9th, but what happens to James Comey today, this weekend, over the next several days? Where does this case go?
We're still reporting this out, Willie. There was some talk last night that Comey was going to surrender for processing at an FBI office in the Eastern District of Virginia today. This morning, we're still trying to figure out whether that's going to happen, because it's not necessarily true that he has to do that now that the arraignment has been set in front of Judge Nachmanoff. But a lot of legal experts are looking at this and saying this case may never get to trial because there's going to be all of the things that Donald Trump did on social media, both before and after the bringing of these charges, will be the subject of motions to this judge for vindictive and malicious prosecution, for improper pretrial publicity. Look, the Trump administration was just chastised in the Luigi Mangione case for making improper pretrial statements, the Attorney General and the President and others. This post on social media excoriating James Comey is going to be Exhibit A in that kind of motion. And so this judge is going to have a lot of work to do before this case ever gets to a jury adjudicating some of these claims. And, you know, looking at James Comey's pre-recorded video reminded me, because I covered him when he was the FBI director, he is a charismatic and eloquent figure, whatever you think of him. He's a great talker. And unafraid to communicate publicly. He used to have weekly roundtables where he would answer any question from reporters. That's something Chris Wray never did and Kash Patel never thought of doing. And what the Trump administration has done here is they've given this man a giant megaphone now that he didn't have before. And that may be something they regret down the line, guys.
Again, it's just, it bears repeating. You do this, you turn the person you hate into a martyr. You make them bigger than ever. You unite people behind them. Donald Trump understood this in his own political campaign, and yet he's now making Comey a martyr for the rule of law. That will be the first line in his obituary, that he was an FBI director, but that he became a martyr because a president said on social media to an attorney general, go and arrest this guy for the first time in our lifetime. And so now the world looks at James Comey and they see that he is a political and a legal martyr. Nobody thought that way yesterday, but they sure as hell are going to think that way today and tomorrow and into the future. And again, if you don't believe me, again, just go back to the 2024 campaign and look how the Republican Party was ready to move on to a certain Florida governor, and then the indictment started coming down against Donald Trump, and that brought the Republican Party together behind him and eventually led him to be elected the next president of the United States. This is not hard. And yet the White House keeps making the same mistake. Jimmy Kimmel, record numbers. Right. I mean, talk about going viral. It's extraordinary what Donald Trump did for Jimmy Kimmel's career and what he has now done for James Comey's reputation. That's the political side of it. Really quickly before we go, I want to ask you first, Danny, and then I'll get to Barb on the prosecutor's side. But as a defense attorney, Danny, tell me, what would you do if you had the President of the United States saying to his Attorney General, this guy is my political enemy, arrest him, he's got to be put in jail, he's guilty as hell, saying something along those lines, he's guilty as hell, he's one of the worst people in the world, time's running out, you remember that one? Time's running out, it's statute of limitation, you gotta do it now, we've gotta bust this guy. Okay, I've just put the ball on the tee and given you a bat to hit with it. What would you do hitting that ball off the tee? It seems like an open and shut case, doesn't it?
Well, let's start with the primary defenses. Attack the statute. The defense is going to be this was not a material statement, this was not a false statement, and even if it wasn't a knowingly false statement. But then we get into what you just described, and I expect you will see a motion for dismissal based on selective prosecution. The problem is all federal prosecution is selective, and these motions have a very, very small chance of winning. That being said, this is probably the best case ever for a selective prosecution motion. But be warned, they are not often successful because, after all, that's what federal prosecutors do. They have limited jurisdiction, so theirs is a sort of selective process. They can't prosecute everything that falls within all federal criminal statutes, so they have to look around and decide where to focus their resources. And that, the government will argue when this motion comes, is exactly what they did in this case. The problem for them is going to be the paper trail of evidence. Not so much things like the U.S. attorney is inexperienced, but far more compelling is the public statements that the president has made saying, get this person. But again, I'll say it for the third time, be warned, that part of the defense is probably, as crazy as it sounds, the weaker part. The better defense for Comey is to attack the charges themselves. My statements weren't false, they weren't material, and even if they were untrue, they weren't made knowingly. That's his best shot.
They've already been investigated. And yet, Barb, while this doesn't usually work, you usually don't have a president ordering his attorney general to arrest a political enemy. Let me say that again. You usually don't have a United States president ordering the Attorney General of the United States of America to charge and arrest a political opponent of his in public. We had it here. Tell me, what judge is not going to look at that and say, why are you wasting my time here? You want to have your political fights, do it, but do it outside of this courtroom. This is a disgrace. What judge would not do that?
Yeah, just to pick up on Danny's definition of selective prosecution, it is true that prosecutors exercise discretion in choosing which cases to bring, but there is case law that due process is violated when prosecutions are selected on an arbitrary basis and not a legitimate law enforcement basis. And one of those prohibited bases is political motivation. Now, as Danny said, it's rarely successful because it's very difficult to prove the motivation of a prosecutor. If you've got the evidence, usually that's enough. But in this case, as you said, with this incredible paper trail,
Exactly.
I think it might be pretty easy for a defense attorney. So if I'm a prosecutor in this case, God forbid, I cringe every time I see one of these posts from Donald Trump because he has just made the defense case easier.